to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta. I am the Quiet Warrior, and I'm excited to have on the show today Mr. Reino Gevers. Reino, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you, Tom.
Yeah, fantastic. You know, the magic of technology, you're over somewhere on the other part of the world, and I'm here in Vancouver, British Columbia. Is it Majorca, Spain? Is that correct?
Majorca, Spain. That's an island south of Barcelona in the Mediterranean.
Fantastic. And I think I've been there off a cruise with my wife at some point. Now, I understand we're going to get into a conversation about many things, but this is a different time. It's COVID-19, and I understand Spain is still in lockdown.
We're still in lockdown. We're gradually getting out of it. Spain, as you know, has been one of the countries really badly hit. We've been lucky on the islands here because they're relatively isolated. But of course, like all other parts of Spain, we had some of the strictest lockdowns in the world. We were basically shut in our homes, and we could only go to the nearest supermarket and back, and that was it. You couldn't even take doggy out for a real walk.
No, it's absolutely amazing. Well, first of all, prayers and thoughts to all of those who've been lost. We've had our share here, but I can't imagine the scale that you've seen. And so, we're doing this with a purpose today to actually honor all those people in the world who maybe aren't as fortunate as us being live on the video. Reino, this show is all about you, so I'm going to just ask you to take a minute, and I'm going to do something different here. Tell us one thing about yourself that you think people don't know about you.
Well, I was born and bred in South Africa. I left my home country, South Africa, 1980. It was a time, as some people might remember, when there was a state of emergency. It was in the middle of the apartheid era. The country was in a really bad situation. I was a reporter for a daily newspaper at the time, so I had to leave because it was getting politically pretty precarious. I left for Germany, lived in Germany for many years, worked there for an international news agency in the port city of Hamburg. So that was my passion for many years, being a reporter, being out there where the news was. And then I hit the wall some 12 years ago when the whole digital revolution hit the media industry. And I was one of the guys who then had to reinvent myself with a third of the employees having lost their job. Before that, I already had some doubts on what I was doing because the news media is very much focused on negativity.
Yeah.
And I realized for myself that I wasn't really enjoying what I was doing anymore. That was one of the reasons why I took a walk on the Camino. I was at the time in a bad health situation. My marriage was on the rocks at the time. And I had to look at finding a new job. So,
I'm going to jump in right now. And first of all, I'm catching my breath because I'm already starting to, as I say, vibrate in my chair, and my mind is going in so many different directions. There is so much wisdom from what I've learned about you, but I want you to take a moment and pause there. And I'm going to build you up and read to my audience some things I've learned about you, Reino. You mentioned Camino, and Reino has walked this Camino pilgrimage some 12 different times. We'll clarify that more. I'm going to tell you how we met. We met through a mutual connection. I have a New York-based publisher, Morgan James Publishing. I happened to receive Reino's advanced copy of his new book called Deep Walking for Body, Mind, and Soul. I got into it, and I was fascinated, and I said, I've got to get him on my show. And that's how we met, and we started this journey. A little bit more about you, that you had written a first book called Walking on the Edge, and it actually was a work of fiction based on some of these things you just told us about. We'll get more into that. I'm fascinated by your 20-year career in journalism and reinventing yourself. And then the actual pilgrimage itself, I call it on my bucket list. I said that to you, that I'd love to be able to do that once in my life. And so here you are, and you spend your life giving beyond yourself to impact the world. I also, a few fun things I read, you like to hike, practice martial arts, writing and blogging. I can already figure out what it would be like in COVID-19 to see you doing martial arts in your little home over there. Probably a little challenging.
It was quite a challenge, yeah.
I bet you. So just a pleasure to be on. Now, the show's about the hero's journey narrative, right, which I know you're aware is the journey one takes. And sometimes in our life, we hear this call to adventure, to do something different. So I'd like to have you take us back to when, wherever you want to start. And you mentioned, the career in journalism, South Africa. That in itself is a big change. And take us to the point of hitting the wall and then making that shift.
Yeah, well, look, I was at the point of a job burnout. And a good friend of mine said, look, why not walk the Camino? This is an old ancient pilgrimage route. It'll free your mind and you'll know much better on where you want to go after walking it. I had my doubts because I was a very logical, rational-minded journalist at the time, very skeptical. So I did a first walk, a very short walk of about 150 kilometers. And that in itself was something that truly fascinated me. And then I decided, okay, I'll do the whole 500-mile journey the next time.
Well, I've got to tell you, I mean, there's a dark side of humor of me. And, when you see me on the mic, it's pretty hard for me to express myself. But I got to say that when you say a very, very short walk of 150, I mean, I'm going like, are you crazy? To me, that's probably a walk. That's 30 days worth of walk. So help us understand what that picture is that I have on my green screen. It says Camino Pilgrimage, but describe that to us. What are we looking at?
Look, this is a very ancient pilgrimage route traversing the northwestern part of Spain. The medieval pilgrims walked this route for many hundreds of years, but there is a legend that it goes back to even Celtic times, that this was a route of ritual during the pre-Christian era and was only then rediscovered and ritualized by the Christian tradition in the 12th, 13th century. For a time, it was closed when the Muslims ruled a large part of Spain. And then for a while, it more or less died down, beginning of the last century. And in the latest part of the 20th century, it regained popularity, with many people then rediscovering this route as a route of self-discovery, because it's very much an analogy of life.
Yes.
Because as you walk, you actually literally walking on paths traversed by pilgrims for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah, amazing. Now, you talked about burnout. This is a big passion for you, mental health. There's a whole component to that. When I read your book, it stood out for me. I'm looking at my note here, body, mind, soul. Can you help us understand what burnout, I mean, what are the signs of it? How did you know you had burnout? What happened?
Well, you reach a point where you are literally at the point of mental, physical exhaustion.
Yeah.
Extreme mental, physical exhaustion. Where you literally find yourself in a dark tunnel. You don't know where you're going. It's a form of depression, but it's not manic depression. It's physical, emotional depression.
Sure.
And it's more or less the body telling you got to change something.
Yeah.
What you've been doing up to now is not good for you. The body is very intelligent. It has its own wisdom, and it stores all the trauma that you've lived through all your life. And this is what I discovered for myself. While walking, you're literally walking things off. You're walking off that trauma. You're regaining your energy, your power while walking, because we are living in a world today where we are so distracted by countless things. We don't know who we are anymore. But when you're out in nature, when you're out listening to the voices of nature, the stream, the birds singing, you're feeling the breeze against your face, you reconnect with a higher wisdom, and then you rediscover your own self-purpose.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. First of all, I want to honor you, Reino, for the work you're doing. And you know what? I just did my first TED Talk about lifting the stigma, or showing leaders how to lift the stigma of mental health. I've been in business 30 years and as a leader, and not a lot of people are comfortable talking about it. I've gone through my concussion into cycles of depression. I've talked about it, and it's interesting when you say about trauma. Was it your journalism career? What types of things from the past manifested themselves to really create that for you?
Well, look, when you're a reporter and and I was at the scene in the middle of the township war in South Africa, so I did see people getting killed. I saw bodies on the streets, and at that time I was a reporter reporting very factually what was happening. But while I was walking the Camino, all these things came up again. I relived that time in my life, but differently. I could see it more from a bird's eye perspective, but obviously some part of my consciousness had not let go of that part of my biography yet.
Well, thank you for
sharing. I literally had to walk that off.
Yes, and for those who just joined us live, we have a picture in the background that I have on my green screen. It's an image from the Camino Pilgrimage. And Reino just told us earlier in the show that his first shot at it was a very short walk of 150, but it's about 500 miles. I think it goes from Spain, France, right? If you do the whole thing.
Yeah. The whole thing is from Jean-Pierre-le-Pont, a small village in France, and then it goes across northwestern Spain through a number of federal states.
Yeah.
And then the destination is Santiago, where, according to the legend, the bones of St. James, the apostle of Jesus, lie buried. And that is the motivation why many of the medieval pilgrims walked the Camino. I think today, most of the people who walk the Camino are really spiritual seekers.
Yeah.
From many different religions, from many walks of life, and people basically who have gone through a hard time in life. A lot of the people I've spoken to on the Camino have had to deal with the loss of a loved one, have gone through a job loss, through the life battles that so many of us go through, and being at the crossroads and then wanting to find answers. Some people find the answer pretty quick. Some people find them months after walking the Camino.
Yeah, incredible. I was reading the book, and I'm just going to mention it again, and maybe you can bring this into the story. The new book, tell us when it is or will be released. I wrote a review, by the way, on your book, and as you know, a 5-star out of 5-star, posted it on Amazon, Goodreads, so people could read it there. Deep Walking for Body, Mind, and Soul. What I really liked about the book, besides the fact that you drew me in, it was as if I was walking the Camino with you. That's what really got me. And it was at the end of each, you give almost like some hacks or some tips and things. You could talk about that. One of the things I wanted to mention to you and to get your perspective on is you mentioned how walking and trauma that you had experienced through your life as a journalist and whatnot sort of came back to you in a different way from a bird's eye perspective. I want to share with you that I took a course for my own depression recently called cognitive behavioral therapy. And I was taught that our brains have a trigger. It triggers a thought, and our brain goes to look for other thoughts that are wired in us unconsciously. It's actually lazy. It doesn't go create a new thought. It actually finds thoughts that are from the past, and then from that comes emotional and behavior. And in order to have a thought about your thoughts, I've been taught that you have to step back and become grounded, or the mountain. In other words, if we're a mountain, the weather is our thoughts. Most humans are always in the weather. until we pause, meditate, walk a trail, go in nature. We can't step back. And so it seems to me that through this trail experience, you and many walkers have had a chance in peace and harmony to really start reflecting and thinking about all these thoughts. Things on the trail must have triggered you to have these thoughts again. Just tell me what you think about that.
Yes, well, there is a big difference, I think, between just going on a hike for exercise purposes and taking a longer walk lasting several weeks, where you go through an entirely different process, especially on an old ancient route like this. Of course, you can go on a hike anywhere in nature. I think you'll have the same experience if you take time to do this over a longer period. And my experience was that you go through 3 stages. The first stage is where you go through all the pain, the body pain, the emotional pain, and then the second stage where you go through that dark tunnel where you're asking yourself, why are you doing this? You're questioning yourself, you're having doubts, you're at the point of giving up and going home. And then after going through those 2 stages, of those pain stages, I call them, that's when you literally start hitting the next level of where you no longer feel your body. You go into unity with the world around you. You're more or less on automatic. The walk that was very, very difficult 2-3 weeks ago, you take with ease.
Yes.
And that's the stage where I think you transmute a lot of the issues you had to deal with earlier on. And the analogy, of course, is that these processes we go through, those on the ground moments, are actually times of grace, where we elevate our consciousness, where we move on to a higher spiritual level, where we rediscover our life purpose. Those are really training grounds.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what you just described is the narrative I learned through the hero's journey, the one I talk about, Joseph Campbell, which some call it the dark night of the soul, but we get to a point of have so much pain in life, or something changes, loss of job, loved one, and then you go on this journey. I've met so many people who have taken that journey, but really not come through it in a way where they've been awakened to some purpose or passion. Take us on the trail. People who are watching or listening, they haven't read the book. I want everybody to get the book, to read it. I highly recommend it. But along the trail, it's not just that picture, but there's where do you stay and meeting different people. Tell me more about that.
Well, the traditional way of doing this is you do your daily stage, and then you stay in a pilgrim's hostel with other walkers, other pilgrims. So you share meals together, you sleep in bunk beds. So it's really very much the basic stuff. You have a small backpack.
Tell us about that, because I read that and it blew my mind what you actually had to strip out. I mean, a small backpack to me is not what you said in the book. What does that look like?
Well, you really only take the most necessary with you. And the interesting thing is that first-time walkers just take too much stuff with them. Yes. So after 3-4 days, they discover, wow, this is, 1 kilogram is like 10 kilograms. Their knees start hurting, their back starts hurting. So what they do is they empty that bag, they empty all that stuff they've been carrying with them, and they either throw it away or send it home. And they find that really you don't need much in life. Mm-hmm. All you need is your little backpack, your essentials, your toothbrush, your socks, a t-shirt for the next day. What you do is you wash your t-shirt or your underwear that dries out, and it's you ready for the next day. So you're doing about 4 or 5 hours of walking a day on average. Yes. And then you spend the evening. This is the really nice part of it. exchanging the experience of the day with fellow pilgrims. And that's where you really
give us a story, something that stands out that we can learn from, somebody you met or just in one of those moments.
I met an interesting guy last year, an 85-year-old Dutch pilgrim, 85 years old,
Wow.
who'd walked all the way from the Netherlands, from his doorstep, to Lourdes in France, and then from Lourdes all the way to Spain, to Santiago, and from there to Portugal, to Fatima. And then from Fatima, he walked all the way back to his home in Holland.
At 85. What was
85.
That's incredible. You know what? I'm not going to feel sorry for myself anymore. What was his motivation? What did you learn? Why would he do that?
What I learned from this guy was so much we tell us in our mind that you can't walk this. It's too tough. It's too strenuous. But there was this 85-year-old guy telling us anything is possible. If you put your mind to it, anything is possible. And this is what I learned from so many of the other pilgrims. The mind is so much more powerful than the body. So many of the people I met, including myself, would never have walked 25, 30 miles a day. But there you are doing it.
Yeah, they say the mind's like plastic. You can remold it, and I'm amazed. I don't know if I told you I did something called the Ride to Conquer Cancer. I'm not sure if I shared that with you, but it was in 2018 in the fall. I'd never done it before. It was 225 kilometers on a bicycle over 2 days, and I remember starting to train with it. And you're bringing me back into that journey. That's why I love your story. That when I did my first 10K ride, I hadn't been on a bike since I was a kid. And I had all these fears, and I hit the wall. And my team captain said, "Tom, you got to do a century ride." And I said, "What? What's a century ride?" He said, "Well, when you hit your first 100K, and you don't do 30, you go until you hit 100, and then you do the 225 over 2 days, and there's hills." I'll tell you, everything you're saying makes sense. There are so many times I wanted to quit and turn back, but when I looked around on the ride and saw these bicycles, there were 2,000 people, and some of them had yellow flags. My heart got emotional because I said, "What's that?" And those were people recovering from cancer who had beaten cancer. Mm-hmm. And like your 85-year-old, Reino, it gave perspective. So give us a moment where you if you felt like giving up on one of your walks, and how did you push through it? Like maybe we can apply this to COVID-19 and that mental toughness that people need right now.
Yeah, look, my second walk was the most difficult and was at the same time the most fulfilling. I got lost in the Pyrenees Mountains. It was dark and I was in the middle of a thunderstorm, so I had to find cover in a grotto overlooking a cliff. So now what happens in the Pyrenees, you have sub-zero temperatures at night. This was in May. So if you spend the night out there, you could easily die. So I just said to myself, look, you just got to keep on walking. You can't sit down here and wait until it gets to midnight, because then really you're going to have a tough time. So it was absolute pitch dark, and I had no clue where I was. I was absolutely in fear, and then I just asked the higher universe, just lead me, just take me where I need to go, and at some point, I saw a light in the distance through the trees, and I just followed that light, and it took me to the village where I needed to go. And this was actually shortly before midnight, and the lady in the small hotel had real pity on me. But it was quite an experience, and I was then at the point of really giving up. But I decided the next morning to continue. And I did the whole stretch.
That's amazing. Well, thanks for sharing that. I just visualized that story. I can't imagine. From everything I read in the book about doing that walk, I guess there's two types of people. Those who say, that's nice, I'll live through his stories. And others will say, you know what, there's something in my gut, I got to do it. Tell me, in the book, there are so many things you taught us. We're in this age of COVID-19. Many people are losing businesses, loved ones, there's stress. And sometimes it's like being on that trail. If we haven't done the journey before, we can't see the end. from the things you taught in the book, from the stories and the chapters, give us some wisdom on what you would coach people in this time.
I think at this time we really are in a flat on the ground moment. I think the universe is trying to tell us something. It's telling us, humankind, you got to change your ways. You got to go into introspection, and so much in our world is dysfunctional. So I think the lesson we need to learn out of COVID-19 really is we need to change our ways. We need to preserve our environment. We need to protect our world. We need to move into a more sustainable lifestyle instead of an exploitative economy. We have to change our mindset. The mindset being we have to go more into self-care, because if we go into self-care, into self-love, we have an entirely different approach to the world around us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, when your livelihood is feeding families and looking after your children, it can be scary. I'm not sure if you saw some of the pictures that were shown through the last couple of months about the environment. You mentioned it, so I want to go there. Went on a journey in my mind that all of a sudden you're seeing these images from satellites where pollution is cleared and the world is back to what it should look like. Cars are off the road, gasoline's dropped to X number, say half price, and people are reconnecting with their children. And somebody asked me that, what does this mean to you? And I'd say that it's a God or somebody hitting the pause button. And I think it's going to redefine the world. When I look at that trail where you are, I've been to Spain. Is what we're seeing there on the horizon, the mountains, is it generally pristine like that, and the skies are clear? Is that what you get on the trail? Some rain and other weather?
Well, this part of Spain is still pretty pristine.
Yeah.
The whole area, northwestern Spain, is very beautiful. You're walking through forest, you're walking through mountains, you're walking through the Meseta, which is a flat, plain, boring landscape. But that's one of the greatest challenges and one of the most amazing parts of the Camino. They call the Camino, they divide it into those three parts I spoke to you about. The first section going up the mountains from Jean-Pierre-le-Port, the really steep part, the tough part, the route of the crucifixion, then going through the valley of death, the lonely part through the Meseta, and then going through the resurrection, the last part, when you hit your destination and you feel that joy of accomplishment, of the bliss, the joy of having accomplished this.
Definitely is the journey. Tell us about that moment when I think you said 500 miles, but when you actually were within eyesight or reach of that. What would just help us relive that if you can? This is like after 500 miles and how many days? I mean, imagine.
Well, this is after 5-6 weeks of walking, doing your 20-25 miles a day. So when you see that cathedral of Santiago in front of you, this is just an indescribable experience. And that's where you relate to the pilgrims of old. In medieval times, this wasn't just a journey where you'd stay in comfortable overnight accommodation. Many of the pilgrims of old never came back. They died on the way. On this route, you'll see many stone crosses of these pilgrims who died from disease, from all sorts of ailments. It was a hard route at that time. So what we're doing today is actually a very comfortable way of doing a pilgrimage.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I will do it. I mean, I'm putting myself on the record that I will do this. Tell us if we do it. Do you go with a friend? Do you get a map? I mean, how does this work? Yeah, up here where I am in Vancouver, British Columbia, we have two things I can share with you. One is called the Grouse Mountain, and it's a trail that goes straight up. People are fit, 45 minutes. It took me a couple hours. They say don't go alone. Another one called Coquitlam Crunch, closer to my home, which is up the mountain and around maybe an hour. But there's this thing I'm envisioning on the trail there. You said you're by yourself and lost. I mean, do people just go on their own and just hope they'll meet others and hope for the best?
Well, on the main route, the Camino Frances, you always meet on the road fellow pilgrims. So it's
Yeah.
a very safe route. So a lot of the pilgrims are women who have no qualms about walking alone. It's a very safe route. And then there are mother and daughter walking together, or grandfather and granddaughter walking together, or father and son. I've done this with a good friend of mine. I did it alone, and I did it in a group with 5 people. So each experience was always very different. I think if you're doing it the first time, my advice is always do it alone, because that's when you really go into introspection.
That's wonderful. You do you have children? Or not sure what your life is today? Do you have family?
Well, I have family, and at the moment I live alone here in Majorca, but that's going to change, I think. I had 2 broken marriages to go through that I had to walk off on the Camino.
Yes.
So that is a process that is hopefully over by now.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I can relate through one change in my life, one marriage. I think about what you said, and I love you and your story. I honor that there's so many people watching this interview saying his story's like mine, and some of the most successful people live in this world of desperation where they have these stories and they pretend everything's okay. You know, you did something about this. You took a journey. You're back now, and your book and the work you're doing is actually teaching and making the world better. I think about South Africa. For those who just joined us or might join in later, you were there as a journalist. You saw some good things, but a lot of terrible things. I have a friend who I knew very well from Cape Town, and he shared some of that with me from his experience. But then to leave that country and go somewhere else, and then eventually, I can't imagine. You know, those things are heroic to me. Is the scenery in South Africa where you were similar to anything on that trail? In other words, did you have flashbacks like, oh my gosh, I'm back there again?
Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of the countryside there reminded me very much of my home country, and that's why I live in Spain today, because I feel so much at home here.
Nice.
I made this my second home.
Yes. Well, that's awesome. I know I'm a home chef, a foodie. I like to say Chef Tommaso's Michelin star kitchen. I do a lot of cooking. Maybe one day I can cook for you. I know the time we went to Spain, we got off the cruise ship, did just the day, the food and, you know, the small plates. I mean, give us a feast from your experience, or what's that side of the world?
Oh, one of the most amazing experiences was after a long day's walk, reaching a small village in the late afternoon. I was walking with a friend, and we saw these trucks outside a little street restaurant, and I said to my buddy, that's where we're going to go. If the truckers go there, it must be good. And this was an old Spanish granny who picked the herbs out of her garden and made one of the most delicious Galician soups.
Wow.
It was just amazing.
On my list of books to write next, I've been playing with the idea of writing it around cooking and sharing my love for that. That actually, as you know, from my book, became my love language. I escaped through cooking when I was a kid, and today, I mean, it's a glass of wine in one hand and bouncing around the kitchen. I mean, it's my happy place.
Yeah.
So thank you for telling us about Spain. I highly recommend people who haven't been there. It's a beautiful country. I see you're in this place. Just I'm curious, and we'll head to wrapping up in a moment. But tell us about the home you're in. Is that some place you stumbled on, you bought, you found, you like? Is it different than what you had in South Africa?
This is an old traditional finca that I live in, that I rented. It's thick walls, thick stone walls. It must be several hundred years old.
Wow.
And it's getting dark here now. I can't show you, but it looks directly onto the Tramontana Mountains of Majorca.
Beautiful.
Beautiful mountains that are ideally suited for hiking. So I go there with my doggy like every day or two, do our walks there.
That's beautiful. Now, we've talked a lot about the book. I think I've told snippets. Tell us just anything you want about how people can get it, why you wrote it, or anything you want to share and leave us with on that.
My purpose in writing this book was really to motivate people to just take a walk. To start with a small walk, because when you're walking, you find your natural rhythm, and especially walking in nature. Reconnect with nature, and you'll find your purpose. Go along with the wise people of old, like Johann Sebastian Bach and many others, famous writers of centuries ago, who always went into nature when they explored their inner worlds. So I really want to motivate people to reconnect with nature.
Oh, thank you. And my doormat is here and open for you. My wife and I, 5 minutes from my home, there is a place called Burrard Inlet. And the inlet actually leads out to the Pacific Ocean, which you can go as far as the Pacific Rim, Asia, if you're a tanker or a boat. And there are trails around the inlet, beautiful trails. And I spend a lot of time on the trails, meditating, thinking. Sometimes I'll take my mobile studio out there. There's something right now about going, like you said, that it gets me grounded, but it's peaceful. And not enough.
Absolutely.
And not enough people, especially high-powered people, leaders in the business world, take enough time. So you've really taught us something there. Reino, I want to look to my paper here as this is what it's like when I'm on the mic and not with video. People won't see this, but as you're talking, I'm writing down things. And I want to honor you with some leadership words. I've written these down from what you've been telling us. They're not scripted. And everybody, this interview is not scripted. It never is. And so the first one is purposeful. When I think about what you've said, you're a purposeful leader. 2 is fun and passion. I'd like to hang out with you for a day. And I think that brings us strong mental health. Wisdom. I mean, we don't have time to get into your head, but man, there's a lot more in there we want to hear. And the last one is persistence, not only for doing the walk 12 times and getting it done, but what you've told us about the journey through your life. I honor you, man. It's amazing. So on that note, I'll give you the last word before we let you go. Anything at all?
If you're tired, if you're exhausted, just go out and take a walk.
I love it. Simple. Sounds like a TED Talk, an idea worth spreading. Well, everybody, find this episode. Once I produce it, this video will be on YouTube. We're live streaming now. It'll be produced into the Quiet Warrior Show and released on all the popular podcast channels. And find it and like it and honor Reino's work so that he can continue his mission. Hey, Reino, thanks for doing this. And I'll send you the video to show you how you look. You look fabulous, man. and
so great talking to you, Tom. And I know you have the same ambition of spreading the message of mental health. And I wish you great success in that.
Absolutely. And we will meet in the future somehow. Thanks for being
I'm sure we will. Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca